said, now all that is forced practice. Now over there beside it, and Gail and Julie can explain this much better than I can. Julie tried to give me a rundown. And I know I'm missing on what the county ordinances actually are, but the majority of it looks like, from what I can tell, the majority of places, the buffer is 50 feet. On kind of a broad brush. Is that somewhat accurate, you know?
50 feet, yeah.
Okay. So, as a fish guy, my recommendation, if I was going to make one, would be that we try to bring county ordinances with this opportunity in the new Bill 5 to try to bring county ordinances a little closer to the existing Forest Practice Act buffers, especially with regards to SSBT.
But if I read this correctly and recall correctly, the county's measurement starts at the edge of the riparian area and goes out. It doesn't start at the water's edge. Is that correct?
So for the Forest Practice Act, we started the ordinary high water mark. The county riparian buffers, do they start at ordinary high water mark and horizontal out, or do they start?
Our buffers from the line of non-aquatic vegetation.
Right. So that's going to be very similar to.
Yeah, so I always struggled with that wording. So is that the same as saying that it starts at the end of the riparian vegetation?
No. No, it doesn't. We use ordinary high water mark anytime, like when we're measuring for a landowner or for Forest Practice Act, we use the ordinary high water mark, which is basically it can be denoted by vegetation, but in streams where there is no riparian vegetation, then we go straight, or they're in size, it actually comes back full width. But on a normal, healthy stream, so let's go back. So on a stream with a good riparian buffer already there, where to go? Ordinary high water mark is going to be right back in here somewhere. Like you can see that this has been influenced by water flow. You know, where those gravels are, water's low right now, that's your wetted width. But your active channel width would be basically from wherever the water normally resides, not during flows, but where the water normally resides on both banks. So those are the measurements we use in the
And I'm not trying to, on the county's definition of where do I start measuring the 50-foot buffer?
We call it the line of non-aquatic vegetation, which I think as staff we still have a lot of ambiguity about as well. And without a code right in front of me, I don't want to be more specific at this point, so I don't misquote.
Well, let me suggest to you that it would be nice if it said what he already said in the prior slide, and that is it starts at where the riparian vegetation ends. And somehow in my mind, I'm equating that to what you said, but I like my definition a whole lot.
It's clearer than non-aquatic vegetation.
Okay.
Actually, the channel geomorphology is a much better indicator. It's unfortunate you don't have a nice photograph of that. I know you weren't expecting this kind of dissension around it. But there are some much more clear examples that you can point to that show the general geometry of a channel that's so typical in watershed.
You know that off-channel ponding is important to this all.
Absolutely.
6 years ago, eon ago, the county had gone through a big planning process to scout some marshlands and build pretty good acreage of duck ponds down on Clatsop Plains. And this was mitigation for county-owned business park.
Sure.
So it did have a county tie-in. It disappeared. I know the things changed, but it's still all these topics that have agency separation And yet, it's not that long ago. Yeah, it was 2014. They never said they weren't going to do it, but they didn't. You know, and yet it seemed like it would be a good idea for the county to build off-channel ponds. You know, that ought to be on our topics as well as riparian strips.
Yeah, so, that building off-channel ponds are creating, and that's kind of, at one point we used to literally build off-channel ponds with excavators. Now it's become, the process has changed a little bit, and it's like, okay, let's put a large body debris structure here that will force water into the floodplain so that it develops its own off-channel habitat, its own pond, instead of going in. It's a little less invasive. So the process has changed, but the outcome's the same. And those are all parts of habitat restoration. And that's, so if we, when I get past the, I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna come back to that at the end, because there's a piece, when I get done with my whole riparian pitch here, there's a little piece I want to talk about at the end about habitat restoration and where that should fit in the county's plan for what our, you know, what people think habitat restoration should fit in the county's plan. Where should that be exempt use? Where should that be allowed? Where should it be regulated? So let's come back to that part of this.
Good.
So kind of where I got to, where I left off was, my recommendation is, let's line the county up. And obviously, what do you have to be able to for? This is just a fish guy saying, this seems like it would be a good idea, and now seems like a good opportunity to do it. But if we were coming to line with forest practice acts buffer distances, especially with regards to salmon steelhead bull trap, which, you know, for here is salmon steelhead. And this is the one that really strikes me, that I don't know if I got to get to this. A small cutthroat stream only gets 20-foot protection. A small coho stream, and a lot of times there's not, I've seen coho in streams, you know, no
That
bigger
big.
than that.
Yeah.
You get 60 feet. That's a pretty big change. And it's an influential change. So that would be kind of where my sales pitch would go. And then the next question becomes, well, how does a landowner tell that? And that information is actually there. Oregon Department of Forestry has a stream type EIS layer. That's the one they use for Forest Practice Act. It's done on, it labels streams as small, medium, and large, and as fish, non-fish, or SSBT. So if they've got there, that's the one I have on my computer, so it's the one I grab. That is the coho distribution layer from ODFW. So that is Clatsop County, and every one of those green and red lines is a coho stream. And then the Department of State Lands has another GIS layer, it's called the Essential Salmon Habitat Map. And basically that means there's coho or steelhead in that stream.
Is there any consideration given for wetlands that are hydraulically connected to a stream and provide, you know, whatever you call the fingerling fish things, you know, habitat for them? Is that included on somebody's map or not?
Well, yeah, it wouldn't be, so it would show up on ours just as a linear line, so it wouldn't, you wouldn't get an area from our distribution or from forestries. Department of State Lands wetland delineation maps would have areas for those kind of, for the situation you're speaking of.
But only if they've delineated it. Only if they've
Only if
delineated
they've
it.
delineated, but that's an ongoing process. So no, they're not all documented. Not in the area. We know where the streams go through those. That's the information. So, yes, sir.
2 questions. One, Adel, can we have copies of these slides?
Only if Michael would be so
Yeah,
kind as to
fine.
provide them.
These are giant ones.
Yes.
And I'm having trouble keeping up, writing down all the stuff that's up there. I should get copies. Thank you.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between the red streams and the green streams?
The green are, so it's a glitch in our system. The green are unknown, but all of the green are below where coho actually spawn. So this is spawning distribution. So the red is spawning distribution. So basically what that means is those green streams are bigger streams that go swim through to get to where they spawn, and they may or may not spawn in them. Mostly they don't because they're too big for them. Go for smaller streams. They do rear in them, they do migrate through them. So it's all coho habitat, but the red is actual spawning habitat. Yes, sir.
Many of us, or I can speak for myself, I guess, many of us are in the area higher than the riparian areas. And the runoff from areas of residential that run into riparian waters or fish habitat streams, what and whom deals with oil and petrochemical leakage into that kind of environment?
Yeah, Department of Environmental Quality would be responsible for that. And to your, I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I'm already completely admitted to my bias. I'm a fish guy. So I would love to see buffers on non-fish streams, but that's not a place that that I think our society or our economic classes we're not ready to go there yet. And until the Forest Practice Act goes there, we can't really expect anybody else.
Well, the reason I ask that is that many of the homes there are platted in areas where the low-angle drainage that comes off of the forest lands above us runs right between residences. And when you have a residence that has a wrecking yard sitting on it, that material, whatever liquid's coming off of these vehicles, is ending up in fish-bearing streams.
Absolutely.
And those kind of things can be written into county jurisdictional issues.
They can. Yep, we got to decide. DEQ is doing that, and they are doing more and more monitoring. And there's actually a lot of restoration money going towards water quality monitoring that didn't used to happen. It used to be something that one of the monitors that we really spent a lot of money on now, like Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, OWEB. I was just on a review cycle here not too long ago, and we funded several projects that are water quality monitoring. So, there's more of that.
The one thing about DEQ to keep in mind is they regulate point discharge. They don't regulate non-point discharge. So just the flow of your neighbor's land that seeps down, gets into a stream is totally unregulated. Now, DEQ is interested in what the quality of that stream winds up being. And so they may be sampling those streams. But as far as going back and making somebody stop doing something, it's only if it's an identifiable point source.
Well, that and the fact that
It's a problem. But it's hard to regulate.
Yes, I think we put it into the county.
Yeah, I don't know how.
The county can regulate that. DEQ, they're the agency that will investigate and do it, because not every wrecking yard is going to be a polluter.
Right.
Some are, some aren't. So it's
Absolutely.
going to be points.
clearly do what they have to.
These are all great questions and great discussion, but I'm really yearning to hear what else you were going to tell us.
Oh, no, so I mean, that was the biggest part of my gist was, if you wanted to boil this all down and save you much time, I could have come in here and said, hey, I think the county should try to match up with Forest Practice Act and SSBT buffer distances. There are a couple of other little things, and we were talking about high temperature. So, and I don't know this, to be honest. I haven't done as much research as I should, but one thing I would encourage the counties, all of the counties, to consider as they're going through readapting time periods is what are the land uses? Is habitat restoration an exempted land use on what kinds of zoning? Are there things that the county can do, or the ODFW could do, or the DSL could do to make it easier to do restoration projects? Because sometimes we have a great project in the permitting process, and this is more at the state level, I'm not going to the Clatsop at all, but I know for a myself trying to do restoration projects and dealing with DSL and or, and sometimes it's, you know, the permitting process, even when you're trying to do a good thing, can be pretty daunting. And if I'm having trouble with that as a fish biologist, then the normal landowner is probably going to have a problem with it too. So where is there room? And I'm not saying there's, I'm asking, is there room to make those processes easier? Riparian lands tax incentive, Gail's going to check for me to find out if that's still active in Clatsop County. I know it was at one time. ODFW has really kind of dropped the ball on that program, and we're trying to reinvigorate it and trying to get it back on. And basically what that was a tax incentive for landowners who wanted to protect riparian lands on their property. They would come up with a management plan for the riparian area on their property along the stream. ODFW would approve the plan, they file an application from the county, and they get a tax rate for it. I know it's still going on until a month. I know it was at one time in the past. I don't know if it still is.
There was an odd time, you know, like now, that big areas of Clatsop County are consciously not wildlife habitat. You know, that was as a result of Board of Commissioners declaring that because they didn't want the regulation that went along with it. So it happened years ago, I forgot, it was 20 years ago or what. But there's some oddball things that were consciously done. You know, and it wasn't a chance where you could do it one way now and then do it and change it.
Right.
You know, that would have to be a change in the statutes. You know, so there's some oddball things when you're thinking rationally about wildlife habitat that, oh, that's not wildlife habitat because it's carefully we avoided it being.
Anyways,
And I think we actually have an answer for the.
No, I'm checking.
You're checking, okay. Yeah.
and then, bank stabilization is, and I don't know if the county, is there's really anything that could be incorporated here. I think this is gonna fall mostly on DSL, but still I'm throwing it because it's an opportunity for me to stand in front of a bunch of people and give it a bit. We've done, bank stabilization is always gonna be an issue on the coast, especially in developed areas, because streams want to move, we're human beings, we like to live close to them, so we put stuff close to them that we don't want to move anymore. And historically, we've done that stabilization through these big rip rock walls. And all that, what we're starting to learn is what that does is that speeds up the water and either causes more erosion downstream for you or the next neighbor, and we just keep kind of propagating this problem. And there's some new techniques out there that really work, and they work by anchoring, by slowing the water down. Instead of armoring the bank, you put in structures that actually slow the water down. You use riparian vegetation to stabilize that bank, to slope it back if it's vertical. And there's some new techniques out that can really help landowners stabilize their bank and protect their property, but do it in a way that slows water velocities, doesn't create additional problems downstream, and is a lot better for fish.
That was a big part of the Clatsop Soil and Water Conservation District activity for many years of fencing, protecting, planting trees.
Yeah.
You know, and I know the people actively doing that have retired by now. You know, I have no idea what is substituted for that, but it was a major part of their work. You know, so that cattle wouldn't break it down to get the water. You know, they would put in pumps, nose pumps for cattle to use. You know.
So all the water conservation districts are still doing it. NRCS is doing some of that work and providing some funding for that work. OWEB, to some degree, goes through the watershed council. It's got to be a really clear habitat benefit. They don't always like to call bank stabilization restoration, so it's got to be, it can be done, but it's got to be really clear that this actually is a big benefit to fish. So usually it's not just bank stabilization, you put that in with a large weight debris structure, some other riparian replanter, some other stuff going on. And like I said, I'm not sure how relevant a lot of this is really to Clatsop County, but they're good things to think about, you know, as we have an opportunity to kind of adjust the way we manage. And then last but not least, hangar access. ODFW is really trying to provide more angling access to our state waterways and to different places. So I would ask that, as things are adjusted, we consider making that an easy process. And I mean, it has to be looked at critically. We don't want to go and put, a boat ramp or a dock in the middle of some place that shouldn't be messed with. And it's really important to have that. But at the same time, there are a lot of challenges to even getting an access site put in. So.
One question about your general area of jurisdiction. Do you have anything to do with the coast, with the oceanfront, the seashore?
Oh,
Or do you
myself
just-
personally, no.
No, I mean the ODFW. Do they have anything to do below high tide line?
Oh, as far as habitat wise?
As far as
Habitat
anything.
protection regulations?
As far as anything.
So Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife manages, fisheries populations within 3 miles of the coast.
Okay.
But as far as the habitat, anything on the beach is either DSO or actually Oregon Parks and Rec.
Okay. Because it is one place where there has been some, not bank stabilization, but riprap used for ocean erosion issues on beaches.
Yeah, and
It's
projects
a tricky issue.
Those projects are reviewed by the Department of State Lands and Oregon Army Corps of Engineers.
And it goes in with the bank stabilization, but I would love the county to realistically plan for sea level rise in any tidal areas and building setbacks, elevations. It would be a tough nut to crack with the whole flood level things that have been, flood maps that have been implemented. Too much of the conservation the whole stabilization you talk about is supposedly the best for mitigating the climate change, rising sea level.
There's some neat stuff out there. They've got soil compacts now where it's basically this organic material soil wrapped burrito that you can stabilize the bank with and then plant directly into it. So you can make things happen in a pseudo-natural way, but fairly quickly. Problem is it's expensive. It's cheaper to put boulders in, but the long term, the benefits are a lot better.
Can you talk a little bit more about angler access? I know that it's important to get families and the next generation out into our public lands. And in what way, if you could talk a little bit more about angler access, is that like easements to get down to the river, or five boat launches, because we're working on it, that's expensive. Could you just talk a little bit more?
Yeah, all of the above, and we're finding that challenging too. So Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife just acquired through Recreation and Enhancement Grant, Peterson Point on the Hanicum, 8.38 acres. So we just became the owners of that, and this summer we'll be putting together some volunteers to try to build some trails, clean it up, and just provide bank access and angler access there. I was working on trying to get a boat ramp put on the Clatsop River. That through ODFW's misfortune, we didn't do our research when we bought the property. There was some Army Corps issues and some easement issues that didn't allow that to happen, but we're gonna try to develop that as still kind of a public park. The problem we have as a department is there's 3 of us that are on the fish side of things for this entire district. And we're not really set up to be a very good land management outfit. So we do things with the best intention, and then like Monday I'll be going out to that Clatsop property to pick up a truckload of garbage something out there. So we don't have, we want to create access, but we don't want to create problem areas that other people have to deal with, or adjacent landowners have to deal with. So long-term, us just acquiring properties is not going to be a realistic answer. So
If the county hired a natural resources manager to take on some of that natural resources management burden, I suppose that would be a help to you.
Absolutely.
When the state acquires land, like the Trump County mechanic, who do you call in Clatsop County to let us know that that's happening?
No, I should know that and I don't. I will find that out for you. I'll give you my card and find that out for you. So it goes through our real estate department, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if there are business centers.
Because a lot of the things you're talking about are things that our county parks department is very, very interested in.
Okay.
And if we don't know that something like this has happened, do you contact the watershed councils?
We haven't been contacted.
I'm also not sure.
This is sort of the other side of the coin of the aquatic vegetation, but there's a series of parallel dunes, lakes that start at Camp Quanah and go down to Geary, just about, and they're choked. And I'm wondering if ODFW has any investment in freeing those waterways where you used to be able to take a canoe, go all the way down from Warrenton to Gearhart and fish.
Yeah, we don't at this time, and the permitting process to do something like that would be really challenging. Could you basically, if I'm understanding correctly, we're basically talking about dredging.
Or
No, not necessarily. Well, there's, you know,
they're eutrophying, actually.
the lake I live on, we mow it and then keep the lilies mostly, but there's duckweed is just under the surface. But at this time of year, I look like I'm living on a lake, and by September, I'll be walking across the neighbors on the other side. And it's quite an enormous expanse of waterway that's not waterway, and soon will just be mosquito swamp.
And it's really, to be honest, it's kind of outside of WW's purview. It's one of those things I think unfortunately kind of gets stuck between the different agencies.
And it's outside ODFW because,
So we don't manage land use on waterways other than, so the only, when it comes to wetlands, the only thing we do is when somebody applies for development or change of a wetland, it goes to DSL for their approval. We comment on the biological impacts and possible mitigations. We have no authority to actually approve it. So we comment and try to establish biological impacts that whatever the application might have and whatever mitigation might offset that, but we do it through the DSL and the court, or through the DSL. We are not a permitting agency. We comment on most of the permitting agencies. We don't actually, the only permits that ODFW actually has the ability to authorize is fish passage and fish transport.
You are basically using best science, which nowadays is a difficult thing.
so,
The thing about the eutrophication of these lakes is it's fine to try to remove the weeds, but just cutting them and leaving them in place would tend to make the problem worse by having the material decompose and use up more oxygen. What the problem in those lakes is that there's a lot of septic systems around them. Nutrients are going into those lakes. The amount of groundwater that's going to them that usually sustains them is less. They need some shade to make them cooler. So you need to go at it holistically to straighten out those lakes. And I'd love to meet with a group to discuss that sometime.
We had Reba McIntyre here, and she got to use what used to be, you know, one of the, and is now a very practical parade ground where you can do 18th century military maneuvers and have concerts with the all of that. So I it's all going to work out.
Okay.
I think on the bank side location, one of the alternatives to riprap dynamic revetments. Do you have any examples of a stream that has cobble boom? Right, I haven't seen any either, and I'm really being hammered that that's the way to get the bank stabilized. But I can't find an example of a cobble boom anywhere in the county.
You're talking about basically wing walls?
Right.
Yeah. I've seen them on the line. I don't know of any on the north coast.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not educated on how well they work or what the pros and cons are.
Yeah, yeah. And you are a regulatory agency, though. You regulate the velocity of waters. So if you're doing that and you've got tide gates that exceed the velocities, do you have jurisdiction in incorporated areas? You've obviously got it in the county, but do you step into incorporated areas?
Incorporated.
Incorporated is township.
So, with regards to, you're talking about fish passage.
Yeah.
That's right, water velocities, yeah. Anywhere that is, any stream that has or had historically native migratory fish, we have the jurisdiction to enforce the state's fish passage regulations.
Yeah. We've kind of thought that was a good thing, but I haven't seen you do it with some examples around the state where we've got violations. And I'm talking to a very close neighbour over here who's got 32 or 36 passages that are exceeding the velocities, and we can't get anything done about it. They're supposed to upgrade their infrastructure, you know, or remove some of it.
Right. Yeah, I'd love to tell you that isn't a problem, but it definitely is. We have a lot of situations in which we issue emergency authorizations for something that happens in the middle of winter that, could affect somebody's ability to get out or safety infrastructure, and then they're supposed to come back within a year and fix the pipes. Like I said, there's three of us and a state dispatch partner in the sale. We don't have a lot of nexus for enforcement if they choose not to. The law says, but somebody has to enforce it.
Right.
It's a pitfall.
Yeah. It is.
Hi, I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute.
Okay.
First of all, I really appreciate you coming to our county and helping us out with this. And thank you to Gail for these great series of speaking events that you're bringing to us. So the way I'm going to put you on the spot is, and I know you've said this throughout your thing, but if there's three things that you particularly would like us to, if you had your wish, as we look at our comprehensive plan update, what would be your ideal three things?
Increase riparian buffers, especially on salmon, steelhead, bull trout streams, salmon, steelhead streams. Through make habitat restoration an exempted land use in most zonings, and do anything you can to help us with angler access.
So, from what I hear about the exempt,
Angler, fisherman.
say it's at the inward, the mitigation exempt. Can you explain that a little bit? Is it, because that's a relatively, even though they've been doing it, it's really an industry now.
Well, it's not.
Since we wrote our comprehensive plan, it's different.
So what I'm talking about is more, and again, I apologize that I'm not more up to speed on Clatsop County's exact ordinances, but so an example of what I'm talking about is Southern Folk Order down in Tillamook. We did a monstrous wetland restoration in a tidal area. Almost immediately after that, a Senate bill went through that basically said, well, we're going to remove that kind of activity as an accepted land use on agriculturally zoned lands. There's always going to be a land use struggle. We don't want to take great farmland out of production and make it into wetland, but we also recognize that there's places where Farmland might not be as good a quality as it used to be, it's kind of segregated, and it's a good opportunity for restoration. In Tillamook County, it feels like that's actually becoming a little harder to do restoration in those places. It used to be an exempted use. It was something that you didn't have to get, that was an allowed land use on agriculturally zoned lands. Now it's not necessarily. So that's the kind of things I'm talking about. Where there's room to make habitat restoration an allowed land use, regardless of the zoning, it just makes it so much easier to get restoration actually done.
So what you're saying is exceptions or exemptions, that by allowing that, it gives you flexibility in the land use plan, that in some situations, it might be, maybe not, but like you were talking about, but maybe the greatest good is to have it wetland rather than agricultural land, is what you're saying. To allow some flexibility in there?
Well, just, yeah, it's just a lot of flexibility, and I shouldn't have, picked that agriculture, but it just, any.
We don't want to pick on the farmers either.
When there's conflicting land uses, let's have a nexus for when something's a good idea, or when it works, it isn't that much harder to do. There's not something written into the zoning that says you can't do restoration here.
Isn't that true of most of our zones?
Yeah, so for Clatsop, we actually identify restoration projects as a specific type of use in a zone. So some of the zones is a type 1, it's basically you come in, over-the-counter development permit, and we send you off. Like Mike said, in certain zoning districts, it requires more of a process. When the College Tribe just did their wetland restoration off of 202 a couple of years ago, and they had to come before the planning commission to get approval. And then they had to come back, we had to do some rezoning of the property and things. So it was a very long, complicated process just to restore wetlands and breach dikes. Some zoning districts, we don't even identify it as at all as any type of permitted use, whether it's just over the counter or having to go to the planning commission. And I don't know if that's just because we never thought about it, it was an oversight, but the way the code is set up, if it's not identified as permitted, it's assumed to be prohibited. So there are areas where we could look at that and make sure that we are putting that in there.
Having had my next question stolen by the last two questions, you say that you're only a fish guy, but I can tell you that you've got a lot more expertise than those of us who are trying to make some decisions here. And what I would really, really appreciate would be if you could put your recommendations and your ideas into a short recommendation to the county in an email. And just say, look, these are some of the recommendations that you feel would be beneficial in the long run. And I think, I would love to read and consider that before I have to make a decision on what to incorporate in. Because you've got a lot of expertise in this area, and you can really help us out.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Well, thank you.
Sorry, I think I missed you for a little bit there.
In agricultural lands along waterways, if you do mitigation, could you still have like cow grazing, or hay cutting?
So I believe so.
Because it seems like I've seen projects where the cows go back in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's all regulated by the Oregon Department of Agriculture. It's kind of the entity that, that's the same thing, it's so many agencies. But,
And
yeah,
a comment, why it was so controversial in Tillamook is the big dairy industry.
well,
As part of it, I think, is just that whole, which I think is a very different thing in Clatsop County. It's
well,
just not-
I want to be fair to it too, there were some people that, I saw it as a wetland restoration that I think is being very successful, but there were people that saw it as farmland being taken out of production by the state, and they want to protect their interests, and there's, that's normal land use. And, I wouldn't want to live, I personally don't want to be in a society where, ODFW can come in and take away your land because they think it needs to be restored. All I'm saying is, let's not build into the process blocks towards restoration in places where it is a good idea.
It's even a nightmare when you have a wetland and you're trying to make it a better wetland, you know, that just, yes, you can scoop something out, but don't put it back in because that's considered fill, and it's a whole separate, you know, you need to fill it on an upland beyond the delineation. You know, so it's a crazy process.
The bidding processes for work within wetlands and waterways is daunting, even when it's for restoration purposes. I think it's going in a good direction. I think it's going to get better, but sometimes. Yes.
I was going to put Ms. Hendrickson on the spot. Because I see the value in when you stood up and said, you know, we do this at the counter, then this, and then this, and that. Is there any obvious situations that could be fixed during this time of comprehensive plan update that any problems that come up over and over again that could be fixed when we do this process, and how much input do you have in this process? Because I know you're taking input from agencies and the citizens, but how much does the staff have input in?
We're putting our recommendations into the revised drafts as well. What we don't necessarily do with a comp plan update, which is the high-level aspirational document, is we don't really put the nitty-gritty specific regulations in there. So in a comp plan, you won't see wetland restoration should be an over-the-counter permit in this zoning district. What you would see is a statement that says staff should review all zoning classifications to make sure that wetland restoration is a permitted activity. Or staff, or the county should review all zoning districts to see where wetland restoration can be reduced to a type 1 permit, which is over the counter. So when we get through the comp plan, and then we get to the point where we're looking at the code, which is that more detailed look and contains the regulations, that's where we want to start looking at all of that. But staff, to answer your question, staff is putting our recommendations into the drafts as well.
Very good, thank you.
All right, a couple more, and I got to turn you over to the wetland second.
I liked your sausage idea for bank stabilization, except for the cost, but could you have a pattern online saying this material, where to get it, how do you fill it, what do you fill it with?
That's actually out there. I just need to find it for you. I don't have it off the top of my head, but that information is there, so I can, I'll give you my contact and try to help with that.
So just get it on a website somewhere, remember where to go, or whatever.
Yeah. The information's out there. I just need to remember where to look.
This is a question I ask forestry people as well. I noticed, at least in the thing that just gets handed out in terms of what the regulations are, that there is an exemption for all logging on 25 acres or less. Is that a problem ever for you in terms of maintaining the land along streams? Do people, is that an issue? I mean, is it even a thing I should worry about, that people are cutting 25 acres without any regulation on
Well, I can't really speak to it because I'm not completely familiar with that. That doesn't seem. My understanding was that they still needed a written plan through working on the forestry, regardless of the size of the cut. But I couldn't swear to that. Because,
I just saw that.
Okay. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean,
I think in Forest Practices Act, it does make an exemption for small plots of land, just so somebody with a limited amount of forest is a little more free because they don't have enough land to have all the buffers that are required. Right. Well, I'm saying, I think that they are exempt from a lot of the buffers that.
I was actually not aware of that. So that's all.
It's done to try to be fair to that property owner that just doesn't have enough land to have all the buffers without eliminating their forest that they want to cut.
mean, for me, that's something that I would want to evaluate on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, you done with me for now?
Thank you.
Just to follow up, Monica did check, and
Oh.
the county still has the riparian lands tax incentive. So that is still people out there.
So that is something that ODFW is definitely willing to, we're trying to revitalize, we're trying to help with, so we are willing to come out and consult, help come up with a riparian management plan. You know, it's a county application, but we will definitely do our part to help landowners who want to protect riparian lands on their property.
Well, can you put your email address on something where we can write it down?
Yeah, I will leave a stack of cards.
Thank you.
Okay, apologies off the top if I'm a little froggy. I can verify I've not traveled to China recently, though. So, really, much of Mike's stuff as far as riparian habitat goes takes right off of what I was going to say or could say. I would maintain that the species benefits are even greater on the wildlife side in terms of number of fur bearers, herptiles, that's reptiles and amphibians, and bird life that benefit from those riparian zones is right there. Anything that's going to be good for the fish goes for the wildlife side as well. For the wildlife side of things, as you look through Goal 5, if you've had a chance to read back through the previous versions, comes down to really two things: big game range. We updated, I think it was 2015, the delineations of major and peripheral big game range that are in the comp plan. That doesn't change much. There are also exempted areas. And then the other side of things are what are called sensitive resource sites. Some of those are kind of fixed and unmoving. Say it's a mineral spring for band-tailed pigeons. There's one on Haven Island in the middle of Youngs River. There's one on the south shore of the Nicanicum estuary. There are others around. Those things don't tend to move. Some things move slowly. Those other sensitive resource sites come down to things like eagle nests, heron rookeries. They can change over time, but that tends to be a little more slow change. One interesting thing as I was reading through 1983 that boldly stated we had 2 osprey nests in Clatsop County. I think there's one on almost every corner in Warrenton now. There's 3 at the soccer field. So those tend to be the kinds of things that we look for protections. And for those sensitive resource sites, whatever they may be, whether it's eagle nests, heron rookeries, mineral springs, just raptor nests in general, we also fall back on the Oregon Department of Forestry Forest Practices rules when we're looking at, okay, what's going to disturb a pair of nesting eagles. When someone wants to develop a lot, you're looking at time of year that construction might take place. Is it during the nesting season? Have the young fledged? It gets handled many times on a case-by-case basis because we can come out and determine, okay, the young have fledged early, maybe we don't need to, we can start construction, not have to wait till September 1st kind of thing. We can start in July because the young are already gone. And we work with the county on that as they permit various land use actions. I don't have a whiz-bang presentation here. I've been flying around in a helicopter most of the month. So I'll just throw that open. If you guys want to grill me on, what's going on in terms of comp plan and so on.
years ago, I recall there was a statute that was to protect killing of beavers. It made it illegal to ask a landowner how many beavers he killed.
I don't remember that one specifically. I know from time to time we do deal with things like folks that are looking for a trapping ban on public lands. In statute, landowners are pretty free on controlling fur bearer damage on their lands. It varies by species. Some things require a permit from us, some do not.
This was just a funny thing where while some people think of beavers as being this great wetland builder, it was also explicitly made where no one, you're right, unlawful to go gather the information of how many beavers have you killed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, but that's not something that's familiar to you currently. It's not part of your problem.
Not currently, no.
Yeah.
Is there any such thing as wildlife corridors, like for the elk to migrate from point A to point B?
There are in some instances around the state. We look at wildlife migration corridors. A good example is where they're doing the wildlife overpasses along Highway 97, down around between Bend and Lapine and further south. They deal with migratory herds that really come out of move many, many miles. Our big game here and other wildlife tend to be a little more non-migratory, the elk herds and the black-tailed deer. They may move elevationally down onto private land from, say, state or corporate timber ground. That's just a seasonal thing. We don't look at those passage corridors in quite the same way they do in the rest of the state.
One of our pretty little cows is wearing a leather collar with a GPS thing that sends a signal. Are those signals accessible anywhere, or is this all secret information?
Is that somewhere?
Clatsop Plains.
Okay, that's a
Pretty
project.
little
That's a
cow.
project by the National Park Service, Fort Clatsop.
Has nothing to do
Wanted
with
to,
fish and wildlife.
yeah. Well, we helped them out. I went out there and flung some darts.
Yes.
Fort Clatsop, because they didn't have people trained for wildlife immobilization. Fort Clatsop wanted to see where their elk herds that occurred on the property were moving and going, and so we looked at the Nygaard herd. We tried to get a couple of collars on them, tried to get on the ones that use the Fort Clatsop Trail, and then
Do those pings show up anywhere that we can see them?
you'd have to ask the park. They have the website, I think, that you can actually, if you talk to them there, yeah, you can look up and see all the places they've been.
It's only like a daily ping, is what I understand.
Those GPS collars have a variety of ways they could be
Yeah.
programmed. You typically once a day, if they have access to the satellites, they'll do a data demo.
It was funny to see her out there, 20 feet below my elbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back here.
I'm Mr. Neiman Kyle.
Oh, yeah, I just skipped right over that. Mystery Man from Tillamook. No, I'm Dave Newsom. I'm the acting wildlife biologist for the North Coast Wildlife Watershed District, and we actually cover a little bit more area than the fish guys do. I have half of Columbia County, a little piece of Washington, and all of Clatsop and Tillamook. And yeah, I'm the acting wildlife bio for one more day. Today's.
What do you turn into?
I would turn back into an assistant. So.
And then I have a question for you.
And your question.
So on sensitive resource sites, do you think that the current plan is adequate? Do you have recommendations for us like he did?
The current plan, references those Forest Practice Act rules. We find those to be sufficient for sensitive resource sites, the heron rookeries and things like that. I've dealt, for over 25 years of home building near heron rookeries and eagle nests and things of that nature. When a request comes in or a development permit comes in, we can look at those and go out on a site visit. And the protections that are afforded are pretty adequate.
And we're adding things like birds and butterflies and things, and so do you think that it's keeping up, that it's still adequate?
Well, in terms of just wildlife habitat, of course, like I say, I support all of the riparian things that Mike talked about because those are beneficial to wildlife species as well. We don't tend to get down to species by species, getting down into the invertebrates. I know we have silver spot butterfly habitat type of thing. We're not involved with that.
You're involved with Norway rats, according to your
Well,
website.
as far as,
Which is laughable, but it's,
right.
when you say the Facebook responses of chicken raisers, that's their primary topic.
Sure.
And happily, when you want to learn about them, you go to ODFW's website.
Yeah.
That they're really from Siberia and China, but they're called Norwegian because Norwegians are friendlier in Wisconsin County.
So, but in terms of, any sort of land use, and then the same thing with wildlife habitat, if it's in a wetland, you've got DSL is on that. If it's the beach, we have increasing populations of snowy plovers that are now on our beaches and showing up more frequently. That's also Division of State Lands or state parks come into that. So, like Mike says, we're a non-permitting agency as far as that stuff goes. But we definitely do comment on other folks' permits.
So back to my corridors, do you know any state that has defined migratory corridors for like elk?
Yeah, I'm not up on other states. Yeah, I don't know if they've, across the West. Like I say, we have specifically for big game, mule deer mostly, on the east side.
In our previous discussion of forest, the in-soil fungi and other biological critters that work in a symbiotic relationship with the forest. Does your department deal at all with determining whether those biomes, I guess you would call them, are healthy and present, or the discussion of whether or not forestry area can be re-inoculated if those critters are killed off for one reason or another?
Yeah, not something I do.
You don't deal with that as a biological issue.
Our county GIS guy, Alejandro, years ago, seemed perfectly capable of figuring out where the elk trails, where the crossings were. And you're the good guy for darting. I don't know if we still want to get more detail for any reason, like the little highway warning beeps going off by the Pacific Range or something when they're in the area. But I'm thinking that yes, there is a nexus with county. Haven't talked to Alejandro about that in years, but
And
there's someone on staff.
there probably exists a nexus also with ODOT.
Yep.
On those sorts of things. And yeah, when I said we don't really have migration corridors as such over here, we do have travel corridors, of course, and we all know where the elk cross down, down there by Tag Pioneer Ranch. That's something that comes into play negotiating with ODOT, especially since that's an interstate highway. So yeah, we go there. Got one here and then over here.
Do you work with the big timber companies when they spray to protect wildlife? And do you have numbers and how do you how do you determine numbers? I know it's mostly the big game and a few other and game birds. How do you determine that on the big timberland company land and state forests? And, but just my last comment is I'm very concerned over the rodenticides put out for mountain beavers that are getting into hawks and eagles. And do you monitor both rodenticides and herbicide use affecting wildlife? So there are several questions.
Sure, and yeah, again, not a permitting agency, so I can't tell them they can't do that. I can comment away. You know, we do monitor a number of species. We don't go down to the level of you know, surveying boomer populations across the landscape, but we do keep track of elk and deer, sooty grouse, things like that. You know, we do a plethora of wildlife surveys, and you know, if we're seeing problems in some areas, yeah, we delve into it. But yeah, when it comes to sprays and rodenticides, things like that, yeah, I'm not a permitting authority.
Are the nutria, which I know are invasive, and muskrats, are they seem healthy in the area?
Oh yeah.
Are you, as a wildlife biologist, are you concerned at all with the number of trees that are left when clear cuts are done, or are you concerned about the understory?
Yes,
That goes away.
Yes, we, you know, are engaged with Department of Forestry on timber harvest plans, forest notifications when they come out, to see that, again, the Forest Practices Act rules are being met. We have a certain amount of snags per acre. We have green tree retention per acre. You know, there are other things we look at when we engage with forestry for their plans. They plan 2 years ahead on state land for various harvests, and we're on the ground with them looking at the prescriptions they use, whether, you know, these some areas they're going to go through and thin, or there is a clear cut. If you're going to clear cut, you know, where are we leaving these leaf trees, things like that. We're engaged with that.
Do you think there's any changes that need to be made in terms of wildlife? I know you're not.
In terms of the comp plan, or?
Well, I'm just, the complete elimination of the understory just seems to me to affect wildlife.
Right.
And, you know, two or three trees on the ridge line.
It varies from place to place. I can tell you that some of those areas that are opened up are very productive. It depends on what you know, what goes on with that ground after it recovers from you know, any sort of herbicide treatment they want to do. Some of those things do become quite productive when they're in that young stand age, or you know, more just brush than standing forest. But yes, you know, the progression eventually gets to you where the trees are so thick you have no understory that dies out. And those areas are pretty sterile.
I've not seen rough grouse in a long time. Are they still happy?
I see them around. We don't survey rough grouse specifically. We concentrate on sooty grouse, which have a different habitat requirement, and we're a little more concerned with their numbers right now. Yeah, rough grouse, we're not too concerned. Upland game are a boomer bust kind of species, or you know, quail and things like that. If conditions are right, they can explode. If conditions are bad, their numbers are reduced, and doesn't seem to matter too much what we step in and do. Yeah.
Our nation has been chasing, or have seen quite in the last year, aggressive clear cutting private and state lands combined. Do you guys actually, or does ODFW chase after these clear, or before these clear cuts happen, to see if there's an inventory? Endangered birds, eagles, ospreys.
Right, well, we know where those sensitive resource sites are when, an outfit like State Forestry or the feds are going in and doing a timber plan, they look at their harvest. Are there any sensitive resource sites nearby? And then they have to follow those rules to protect those resource sites, and we, keep tabs on that as we go.
And that's not the case with private.
On the private timberland, on the corporate stuff, they have to submit a notification to Department of Forestry that shows, how much acres, all right down the line what they're going to do. State Forestry has that list of sensitive resource sites that's taking place near one of those. They make it just as they do with riparian buffers and things like that. Written plans are required. How are you going to avoid impact to the eagle nest that's there? So those protections are in place.
Is the old Heron Rookery on Williamsport Road still there, or is it all gone?
Which one's Williamsport Road?
The old site in Astoria.
Oh, yeah. Brown Creek is what I used to call that. That one went away some years ago. Yeah.
How often do you update your sensitive area, maps? To know
With-
where those areas are?
With like locations of eagle nests and
Or
things
whatever
like
you
that.
deem to be a sensitive area that would trigger your
Right.
of that.
Well, I indicated some things don't move. A pigeon minerals gathering site. Other things move slowly. These eagle nests, we have trees blow down. Eagle nest goes away and it comes off of their map, or that someone.
It doesn't come off our map.
Well, it doesn't.
That's the problem.
Part of the problem. It's supposed to. We used to do. Just using eagles as the example, there used to be a survey take place every year of these nest sites. These nest sites were all numbered. Everybody knew where they were, where the activity center was, whether they produced young that year, and so forth. That hasn't been done since 2009 because eagles were delisted. They were endangered, and now they're delisted. So the only way I find out now about new eagle nests is if somebody calls me because one's turned up in a tree on their place, and the same with ones being removed. I don't know unless the tree blows over and somebody tells me about it. But when there's, so I update my map as I can. I go out every other year on herons and every other year on ospreys. So I'm doing it every year for one or the other, and update those nest sites. And so I've got little pins in my map at the office of all the osprey nests in the district, as well as the active heron rookeries. I go see if those historic rookeries are active or not, and just kind of go from there.
So can I follow up?
Sure.
Back to the discussion, and I know you bring up regulatory, but making suggestions for Clatsop comp plan to consider as it develops, your recommendations or thoughts that if possible, area need or habitat consideration for their you said the movement is somewhat limited for the big game and other, wildlife, whether it's coyotes or whatever else kind of goes through. But, as development comes along, traffic increases, 101, is a major boundary for this area. I was just asking if you had any thoughts or wish list or, as a biologist, what could possibly, be done in the future to ensure that the wildlife continues to have access.
Right, and one recommendation we have, of course, comes down into development in some of these ranges, big game range. If you were to just use an example, if you were to plop down a subdivision out on Clatsop Plains somewhere, that's going to displace a large group of elk out into a neighborhood, kind of thing. So we do recommend along those lines. We try and keep development clustered and try and keep it within urban growth boundaries. I'm well aware there are elk within urban growth boundaries, but when it comes out to those to those rural residential areas, we're aided somewhat with some of the zoning out there. If it's a minimum 20-acre lot size, we seem to be able to get along pretty well with elk, but when it drops down smaller than that, more conflicts occur. So if you see a zoning change where we're shrinking lot sizes, or we're going to split some lots and put a subdivision in, those are the kinds of things we're concerned about when it comes to that. Yeah.
Are you able to get the latest wildlife survey numbers up on your website? A few years ago I looked and it hasn't been updated.
Anything you're looking for specifically?
I was just looking through wildlife numbers, big game.
Oh.
Mostly you do the big game.
On our website, you can all the game statistics as far as herd composition, bulls per 100 cows, bucks per 100 does, that kind of stuff, fawn ratios, that stuff's available in a statistics section of our webpage. Yeah, not for, that's all going to be for game species. You can come up with the harvest statistics and stuff like that. I don't believe the non-game stuff's available.
Right. And then when there is a cutting, you have to do an application to state forestry or even private cutting plans of cutting and put down any sensitive species, preparing. There's a lot of information you have to fill out. After they're done with their cutting, do you go back in? Or I know it's been said to my friend Jewel that they often, the state forester doesn't always have the time to go over all the cuts to check off they did everything properly. Do they do fish and wildlife issues, or is that it for you to?
Yeah, monitoring, post-harvest monitoring is kind of the last piece of the puzzle. How do you go back out and make sure that the correct number of snags was created? That there is so much woody debris available either in upland sites or riparian areas. And that's, it's like Mike, there's three of us to drive around and look at stuff, and it's tough. It's kind of the one missing piece. Forestry does not do monitoring. They do cruise the timber, so they know what's there. Before harvest, typically they'll know they've got so many snags per acre, that kind of thing. But nobody's coming back through and verifying post.
Is there any entity, I presume not a state agency, that seems to have much interest in non-economic wildlife?
Well, that stuff, as I say, non-game, falls under the Oregon Conservation Strategy. There's a whole section of the department that's conservation strategy, works with strategy species. They may not be threatened or endangered, but they are species of concern, whether it's red-legged frog in Clatsop County, and invasive bullfrogs, and that kind of thing. Yeah, that's handled. And they do keep tabs on that. They are looking at habitat restoration where they can.
Is there one
Encourages
person
Indian species.
kind of covered in that, or?
What's that? Is it one person?
Yeah, is there one, or is there a cluster of people, or?
They're located at Salem headquarters. You know, we do have a strictly non-game biologist out of our Clackamas office that includes Clatsop County in their kind of sphere of influence. But yeah, and then I deal with some things on a case-by-case basis. They do deal with non-game as well, but not to that level of, you know, let's do some habitat restoration to encourage this species or that species.
There's a good website, you can go to see what's included in that, but I just.
And according to the Delia historian, there's an article that the Gerhard development wants to put in 52 houses side by side. I guess it's not too far from the Delray access to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently there's a conflict with spotted butterfly that use this area, but also it's a calving and feeding and area that the elk utilize that is bordered around.
Sure.
Is ODFW, no.
Go ahead.
Is ODFW involved in this process of this developer wanting to do all of this and displacement of the elk?
Well, we'll see the development permits certainly. You know, there's a whole land use section on the Oregon Solutions process right now, which is specifically looking at elk in the Seaside, Gerhard, Warrenton area. Just to touch on the butterflies, that's a federal thing. That's U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so I have nothing to do with that.
But just to be clear, you're
elk.
not dissing the butterfly.
No, I'm not dissing the butterflies, but I deal with things that have backbones, the higher life forms or whatever. The elk, so specifically in the Gerhard instance, if you look at the comp plan, you'll see that that's excluded range. We have major big game range, we have peripheral, which is typically the forested areas. We have peripheral big game range, which is coming down into some of that ag interface, and then there's excluded areas, which is, you know, west of 101, Warrenton, Gerhard. That doesn't mean that there aren't any elk there. Of course there are elk there. We don't manage for them there. You know, so in terms of Gerhard putting in a development and how that might disrupt calving, you know, you know, if I could snap my fingers and have all those elk move east of 101, I'd do it. There are some folks in Gerhard that like having them around, but yeah, it's a disruption of calving in the beach dunes of Gerhard isn't something I'm really worried about.
Well, according to the article, there's some residents that live in that area that feel not happy with the development.
Right.
I can actually talk to that if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So the development that was proposed, that I believe you're referring to, is called Cottages at Gerhard. And it's 30 homes, or 21 homes on 30 acres is what they're proposing. They did a preliminary neighborhood applicant meeting back in January down in Seaside. They got a lot of comments from the people who lived in the area, who were familiar with the day-to-day activities of the elk. And there is a stream, or the Neopaxi Creek runs through there. There's flood areas that run through the property. So there are a lot of, obviously, environmental concerns. And so they being the developers, have gone back to work on their plans. In talking with them, I know they're also speaking with the city of Gerhard and whether or not they would be annexed into Gerhard. So nothing has been submitted yet. When it does get submitted, then we do send it out to state agencies, which would include Fish and Wildlife, Department of Transportation, Department of State Lands. They all get a shot at or bite at the apple and get a chance to comment on the plans before anything even
that include fishing, federal fishing and wildlife?
We normally don't, but we can, so I'll make a note of
Well, he
it.
spoke of the butterfly. He spoke
Yeah.
of the butterflies. Or federal wings.
Are you the person who sets the harvest seasons for elk? Clatsop Plains, Clatsop County?
In part, you know, it's.
Is there anybody else?
We have west-wide seasons. I mean, elk season, you know, from here to the California border is set, basically. I don't.
But it used to be like, I thought that Herman.
I recommend tag numbers. I recommend if we need to have a damage hunt in an area. You know, I recommend, you know, like increases or decreases in, you know, like I say, bag limits, things like that. Sure. One thing I wanted to touch back on the Gerhard thing, where we're concerned with the development going in, such as that. Remember, I said where you take maybe a 20-acre parcel and split it up into a bunch of half-acre home sites. Is that will then what you have some unsuspecting people moving in to an area, buying a second home or a vacation home, and unaware of the elk conflict that they're about to wake up to. And so we want to try and minimize that and encourage development, you know, so that it can kind of address the issues.
And so do you want to talk about solutions for it?
Have at it.
Okay.
I'm not on the solutions board. That's the other guy, Paul.
Yeah, so Paul's on the elk subcommittee, and I'm on the land use, and Paul's on the land use. So let me backtrack for a moment. So Solutions Oregon was contacted by Warren and Gerhard, and they asked the county to be part of this process to pull in a coalition of state agencies, private landowners, governments, to look at things that could be implemented to help reduce interactions between human and elk. And so we started that process in May of last year. We're supposed to be completed in May of this year. And so Paul Atwood, who Dave's been talking about, he is on the elk management subcommittee, which is looking at ways to change elk behavior, to make them better behave, more polite elk.
Through the elk lobby, I can tell you.
And I'm on the land use and human behavior subcommittees. So we're looking at ways that we need to change, obviously, our behavior, because we are not being good guests either. And how does land use tie into all this? And so one of the things that we are looking at on the land use side, and is a much bigger discussion that's going to require coordination between the county and the cities, is, when we do get developments like cottages at Gerhard, how do we maintain a usable open space that allows and recognizes that the elk have been here, used this land, and passed through it, and then how do we encourage people not to plant things that are going to become an elk smorgasbord? When you plant the roses in your gardens or whatever the elk like to eat, and I'm an elk, just like a candy dish. If I can look here and have one of these, or I can look here and have chocolate, 10 out of 10 times, I'm going to go for the chocolate. And elk are the same way. So, they like things that they like. And so we're trying to discourage people, find ways to work with people to change their behavior. So that was kind of a long digression, but the point being that in May, the committees will have their reports completed. They're almost completed now. What comes out of that is a declaration of cooperation that gets signed by all the different partnering agencies and governments and property owners. That says these are the things that we will commit to doing to help reduce the interactions.
And then the quarter user will cover too.
We have a special segment just for corgis. We call it the strict mode.
So when you do a development, my understanding is, at least recently anyway, most subdivisions that get put in are required to have CC&R, so it would seem logical, God forbid anybody be logical, but it would seem logical that you could put into the CC&Rs that you're not allowed to plant elk candy in your yard.
What are CCNRs?
Covenants, something as restrictions. Now, see how we see. Conditions, anyway. Which for years when development was booming and there were subdivisions going in constantly, we had boilerplate language that we provided to either the city or the county that was permitting that in terms of in getting those in the CCRs for these developments. That basically you are in an area of big game and fur bearer animal use, any and all problems you may have with damage and stuff like that. You're on your own kind of thing. So we did interface with that quite a bit when a lot of these developments were going in. And that is the way to get some of these things in there as far as plantings, as far as fencing, which is going to direct the elk to do different things. If it's only a 4-foot fence, of course 4 or 5 they're going over. Many places you can't build a 6-foot or higher fence.
Because of what?
Ask them. Usually it has to do with aesthetics of the neighborhood. That's what most CCNRs revolve around.
Supposedly it's livability.
Livability, there you go.
And maintaining the character of the neighborhood.
Correct. Style like 17 style chain link fence that's 8 foot high doesn't really do it.
Yeah, I think it's 6 foot Clatsop County.
So we stabilize the spotted owl population in Clatsop County.
Yeah, that's one that I don't track, is nest sites and the hooting activity and stuff like that. I can say that they're facing a real uphill battle because we have more and more barred owls apparently migrating into the area. They outcompete spotted owls at every turn. They use a much wider variety of habitats, including the ones that the spotted owls use. It's my kind of view that eventually they will force them all the way out.
So we can have an open season on barred owls?
The feds already do in some areas to California.
And do you know if wolves have moved into Clatsop County?
Well, I probably.
They're on their way.
Yeah, there's undoubtedly lots of folks on bar stools around the area that'll tell you they're here. I can say.
There were some on those bar stools.
I can say that we have none of the collared ones that we monitor. The nearest one is clear down by Medford that's got a collar on it that we track. Well, maybe that's not the nearest one. I think there's some on Mount Hood. They've got to find their way through the metro area to get here, or up the coast. So that said, I don't know if there's a non-collared one that's gone wandering that's turned up. I get reports from time to time. People will have trail cam photos that I take a look at, other things we can investigate to try to confirm, if that's indeed what is there. I have not been able to confirm a wolf anywhere in our district. Some of that gets complicated by the fact that, going mid-90s, we had some folks here just heading out the east side of town that had a pack of wolves behind a fence in their yard right along Highway 30. When they eventually come a cropper and moved out, I suddenly started getting lots of wolf sightings out in the forest out here. And that was before wolves were even in the state, spreading in from Idaho kind of thing. We had the same kind of situation. I believe there was someone breeding hybrid wolves in the Mist or Birkenfeld area. This is a little more recently, within the last 10 years. They moved on, as a lot of folks do, and don't you know, we got a lot of wolf reports from the Mist to Vernonia area. So, sure looks like a wolf. You know, the folks that see it and catch them on trail cameras, I'm pretty sure I know what their origin is. So, it probably complicates the whole
Are
wolf.
feral animals a problem in this county? I mean, like taking like feral hogs there in eastern Oregon, are they moving their way this way?
We only have the two areas, I think, in the state with feral hogs. We've got the Crooked River area out on the east side, and there was recently a population of hogs sprung up down near Medford that they immediately got to work on a private landowner's place. They have a plan in place to try and eradicate them because they're a big problem habitat-wise. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if it's valid, but I had a doe that had her vulva ripped out, and my research on that was saying that's wolf behavior, the attack from the vulva, whereas it's coyote behavior to have the...
No, wolves will also go after a front shoulder. They do on cattle. They tend to bite haunches and front shoulders.
Just
and
straight.
chomp.
Rip out the rectum vulva.
That tends to be indicative, in my experience, of domestic dogs. I've been out on a lot of dead sheep, goats, other things. Yeah, that's very indicative of domestic dogs.
Thank you.
You indicate you don't know currently. I was fortunate enough to actually see a gray wolf come down out of the forest and run next to me in a snowstorm in the Cascades 45 years ago.
Sure.
But nothing since.
Yep. Undoubtedly, at some point, I do believe they will be here at some level or another, probably after I retire. I don't see it happening in the next, couple of years.
Are there the toy dogs, the coyote dog hybrids much here?
It's not that common.
Okay.
Not that common.
Do you know if clams live above 6 NGVD?
If what?
Clams
Oh,
live
no
above
shit. No
6
shit.
NGVD.
No shellfish for Dave.
Okay.
I went out digging in the cove. It was red hot for about 5 seconds. I got one more clam than everybody else that was there, which was one. That's pretty much.
Just a question
Sure.
on, wherever it might fall under that says here along Columbia, the sea lions. What's happening with that?
What's what now?
What's happening with the sea lions?
Oh, well, they're increasing in number, all along, and they're using these areas. Marine mammal stuff, we do have marine mammal folks. I fortunately don't have to deal with them. I do know that they have, removal efforts underway in areas up near Bonneville and Willamette Falls that are removing animals there to try and reduce predation on listed species there. I'm not involved with that. But yeah, there's certainly no shortage of them lounging on the docks.
What about cougars?
Basins.
What about cougars in this area?
On the increase.
And do you
What
have?
was the question?
Cougars.
Cougar.
Do you have numbers and locations?
I don't have a specific population
Are they solitary?
or a density estimate. For the most part, yes. One tom will typically have a home area that takes in the ranges of 4 or 5 females, and they move around the landscape, and those home ranges can grow or shrink, but maybe as little as 20 square miles or as much as 100.
How are the friendly bears on Clatsop Plains?
It's the same kind of deal. They've got their home ranges. They're around in numbers. I haven't seen increases in bear populations the way we have cougar. Certainly cougar have, you know, grown and grown in recent years. We went from, you know, someone checking in a cougar at our office being a, you know, kind of once or twice a year, kind of a big deal, to, yeah, you know, they're getting run over out on the street much more
Is
frequently.
it cold harvest season for them?
Yeah.
Do you have or not you, but ODW have standing protocol or MOUs that deal with working with their agency and the indigenous nations in the state of Florida? This is Fish and Wildlife.
Right. You know, we do have in those areas that have them. You know, we weigh in on you know, tribal harvest, wildlife side. In my district, it'll be like Grand Ronde.
Yeah.
There's a certain number of tags, percentage that they get to you know, distribute to the membership. They provide me a harvest report on that. That's kind of done more through our headquarters than it is on the local level.
So there is someone that, or some committee of people that the nations approach?
Yes, yeah, and there's annual coordination meetings with the Grand Ronde, with the Slats, and various other entities throughout the state. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well,
For Dave? Or Mike?
enough shots, Dave. Didn't know anybody to ask about wolves today. As far as goal 5, how do wolves fit into goal 5?
So cougars have never messed with my sheep or llamas. Do you have reports of cougars that are getting into livestock?
That's something that we have not seen a lot of. I have gone out on, you know, cougar kills, the kills that I verify as being cougar caused. It's much more common, for whatever reason, in the district to the south of us. They have, you know, weekly, there's you know, a cougar has gotten in and killed goats or sheep or something, and so far I just haven't had to deal with a lot of that on my district.
When you say south of Tillamook too?
South of the Salmon River.
Salmon River?
Yeah, so Lincoln County,
Oh,
and
that's.
south towards Florence, yeah. I go almost to Lincoln City.
They're not extensive.
What's that?
They're not extensive populated as we are, and their farming structure is very different.
Yes, yeah.
We had a big cougar in Browns meat in our sheep once in mid-70s, but the neighbor shot him, ran him since.
That's a good way to get rid of them.
They would not.
Most of the livestock stuff I've been out on, I've actually been out on more bear kills of sheep than cougar, and coyote, of course, and domestic dog, unfortunately. I would say that, you know, 60 or 70% of it is domestic dogs.
Do you have a plan, or do you have people that go out and track the herds of wild dogs?
No,
Packs, I mean, packs.
right.
We've seen them.
Yeah, not, you know, not state managed, you know, so I don't deal with feral critters at all.
Do the timber companies still use professional bear hunters like used to happen?
I'm not sure if they've had the bear co-op operating up here the last couple of years. They were very active in the 90s and early 2000s. That seems to have.
It kind of came to a halt when they found a big pit full of dead bears and gave them a bad name.
heard of quail eating fertilizer pellets? It's a rumor, Jewel.
No. No, I suppose if it looked, like something they'd eat, they'd probably try it out. Yeah, no, I don't have any specific instances.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
And my contact info, except for email, is the same as Mike's. We're at the same office, same phone number, gets a hold of us.
Okay.
I'll leave a stack.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, thank everyone for being here today. Thank you to Dave and Mike for speaking. If you did not sign the sign-in sheet, it's a good way, we count our attendees, so when we report back to the Board of Commissioners, they know that we're pulling people in. Also, if you want to get updates, this is a good way to get your name onto a list to get what's happening. Again, just a reminder quickly, March 13th at 9 a.m., we're doing a historic resources workshop here.